Thank you for the opportunity to present, and I guarantee I'll get you to your coffee on time. No problem. So my project centers around European policy making connected with data protection. So it's a data analysis of data protection policy, all data all the time. So we'll just go through this relatively quickly. The background to this, as I said, is a European data protection policy proposal, which I'll talk about in a moment. And one of the questions that I'm interested in is how do we as a society view data protection? And probably the reality is we don't. We're probably more little corks in the stream bobbing along to policymakers' decisions and large organizations, and whatever they want we end up going along with. So this could be good or this could be a problem. I suspect it's probably a bit of both. What I want to know in the EU is who's making these important policy decisions or who's contributing towards them. We know who's making them, it's the policymakers, but what comes before that? What's in the agenda setting phase? From a theoretical perspective, this falls, I think, within the STS, School of Thought, Science, Technology and Society, which is an extremely interesting field of sociology, which I've only become recently acquainted with in the last year or so. There's also direct links into political science, and the political scientists would be all over this, and in fact they are. But there's a shared concern and a shared interest in these two domains. Interest group representation, lots on that, and policy network analysis, there is less on that, but it is definitely relevant to this work. So this is a quick sort of an overview of the project. If you had to present your project in one slide, I tried to challenge myself, could you present your project in one slide? It's pretty hard. But this is what I came up with. So in any case, this process, current European data protection law is based on 1995 directive. A directive means it's non-binding, but it goes back quite a distance, and as we know, there's been a lot of technological changes since 1995. At around 2009, the EU Commission decided we need to update this. There's been too many changes, and we need to move on and renew the laws. That process then lasted approximately 3 years until they published their proposal. Some of the nuts and bolts that went into this, there were hundreds of submissions from very large and recognizable corporations and organizations such as Google, eBay, lots of others. Couldn't fit them all on the graphic. One of the ones that jumped out at me is this company Axiom. They are data brokers. You may or may not know or have encountered data brokers, but data brokers, nearly every time you visit a website, there could be between 20 and 100 other people listening to what you're doing on that website. So it's no coincidence, as you know, when you visit Amazon and you want to find where's that diffusion of information book, and then next thing you're on another website and whoa, lo and behold, that book pops up on your other website, on your Facebook page, and so on and so forth. Obviously not a coincidence. Creepy, but not a coincidence. So Axiom is a company that will collect, they're an American corporation. They will collect things like college records, driver's license, if you have any alimony, if you bought a house, if you got a car, for all of these type of things. They collect all of this publicly available data, and they will then aggregate it and sell it back to web marketers. Anyway, so they're in there. So what I wanted to know is it possible to create a process that could make understanding all this more easy, and we'll go through this in a bit more detail. So there's the data collection bit, data preparation, text analysis, a bit of network analysis, and for me, the area that I like the most is probably the data visualization. So hopefully some of the outcomes will be transparency of this whole process, a knowledge discovery, some sort of decision support, and a scalable process. I thought it'd be cool if I could come up with something that could be applied to any policy area. So it's a bit of a big ask, but we'll see where we end up. This is a quick overview of that 3-year process. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the big chunks are here, and there were open calls for policy submissions from these companies that we just looked at a moment ago. 168 the first time, 288 the second time, and a little bit more in between. There were over 650. It ended up being about this size. Don't worry, no trees were cut down, and this is my simulation. It's about this size. And the result was this. So how on earth can a human being, a regular person, even the smartest policymaker in the world, get from this to this? And the answer is that you can't. So we all know policymakers and decision makers are overwhelmed. Even as citizens, we are overwhelmed with information. So here's me again, can I make this a little bit more efficient? That's the process, and that took 3 years. It's quite open, it's quite transparent, but it's big. Just real briefly, in case you're interested, this is a huge overhaul in terms of data protection law, in terms of scope. It will apply to any company that's operating with any EU citizens' data, which is pretty much everybody, or every company. There'll be a single authority now, whichever country the company is in, that's who makes the laws. Lots of these privacy by design, privacy by default, everything must be on all the time, very high. Consent now must be more explicit and can be withdrawn. Data breaches, of which there are many these days, you will have to notify, oh, Professor Lynn, your data has been accessed and stolen. They'll have to tell you, not like now where you find out in the media 6 months later, oh, my credit card was compromised. This right to be forgotten is a very interesting one and very controversial. If you were in America, I don't think this would ever happen due to the First Amendment concerns. You can't simply just erase mentions of you in the news because you don't like the fact that you had a DUI or you were, I don't know, up to some college prank. Data portability, if you want to leave Facebook and go somewhere else, I don't know where you could go these days. I hear friends just making a comeback. You should be able to take your data, and huge fines. So these are the big bits, and they're quite revolutionary in terms of data protection. Europeans love them. Americans don't really like them so much. So there's a cultural clash there. All right, so back to me. My goal here, I thought, to reveal this policy content, all within this, while simultaneously inviting stakeholder investigation. If you're an interested citizen, how on earth would you access this process? So, very briefly, and I'll show you this in the next few minutes, you have to collect all these documents, they're freely available. You've got to turn that into something that's electronically accessible, search those results, make sense of them somehow, do some text analysis, and then finally come up with some sort of thematic network analysis. We'll see how this goes. So it's a very methodological kind of approach. My master's was computer science. I've always worked in technology. I like that kind of stuff, so I rolled up my sleeves. If you visited the Commission website, you'd find all the PDFs, all that stuff is all there, freely available, download a lot of it. Crack open your Python or whatever else you like, small script will suck the whole thing down. You'll have your 650 documents in about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. Then you'd run a small script, PDF to text is what it is, in case you does it, and boom, you then have text documents which you can actually manipulate and do something with. So you're getting close to something that a semi-interested computer scientist in a sociology lab can actually deal with. Not this, but you're getting to text documents. Efficient, lazy, I'm not sure, but it works. Right, so listen, it ends up like this. You end up with, unfortunately, a messy, the average size of these documents is about 4 to 6 pages, but when you do that text conversion, there's no formatting, they're just, whatever comes out of PDF, as you know, when you convert it, is messy. So this is the bit where I fell down upon because it was not efficient. I had to manually parse these documents, select the name, select the country, select so on and so forth. So I created a web form. I figured this would be the easiest way to do this, to organize it rather than Excel or Access or whatever. I created a web form in Drupal, which I'm familiar with, and then you have all these fields, the name, the year, the lobbying status, what type of an organization are they, Chamber of Commerce or a single organization, individual person, a lot of individual people, and then you can just pick a country. So I started to divvy the whole thing up, and I had to do that manually. So far I've only done 30, that was my test data set. There are 620 to go. They're not all in English, so I'll have to make some decisions along the way. And the other one about these individuals, would an individual be listened to as much as eBay? Probably not. So I may end up weighting it and making some decisions about who to leave out. This is a database, I'm sure you've all seen them, but I'm putting it up here because I think it's important that from a methodological perspective, that I would suggest in every case, and there are computer scientists in this room who can argue other, I think in every case, you're better off having your data in a database. I suspect you probably all know that, but that light switch went on with me just before Christmas. So all of those fields I showed you a second ago are now all fields in my database. And again, I'm getting some real power into my analysis at this point. I can start to slice them and dice them however I want. Also, the fact that they're online will allow me to produce these results and present these results on the web, which I think is part of my process here. So finally, we come up with something that looks sort of halfway decent. Over here we have our organization names, which consultation period, 2009, 2012, country of origin, the status. You can go on, and whatever would be of interest to you, you can create those fields. This is just my test set. But now I'm actually in a place where I can start to think about what's in these documents. And if you click on each of these, do we get it? Yeah, okay, fine. So this looks a little bit better. Those are highlights. They're merely meant to say that each of these is a field and you can divide them however you want. Organization name, and this is the main body of the text. There are scripts which will help you at this point to create some kind of punctuation and formatting and just make life a little bit easier for when you come along to your analysis further along. Right, so I think that people enjoy entertainment, people enjoy fun, people enjoy visual stimulation, and people enjoy getting information and learning. It's one of the reasons I was drawn to data visualization. So I started creating just some very simple, they won't work here, but these are animatable. They up and down, they down and around, and when you click on them, it doesn't happen in this one just yet, but when you click on them, you would get a text box of information. So who are all the German companies that have submitted here so far? You get the list of the names. And ideally, you will then click on one of those links and be brought back to this. So you can then start to go, oh, very interesting. So that's what SAP said. That really is quite interesting. So you can slice them and dice them. There's a lot of just entertainment factor to this, frankly, because if you want to bring citizens into this process, they're not going to want to look at this. They're not even going to want to look at this. You might stand a chance in this area. So entertaining and informative. This one actually is informative. This is quite useful. You won't be able to see it because it's washed out. But this is a kind of a nesting data visualization. And what these are the countries. You can see Germany, there were 5. I think that's, I don't know, UK, Italy, Germany, so on and so forth. So these are the European companies. They're nested. So that information, those fields have now been nested within each other. Again, when you hover over them, you'll get the full name, and you should get a link back to that text. So hopefully making things a little bit easier. But also from a visual perspective, when there's 650 nodes in here, you'll start to get an idea of the size of this consultation. This wasn't even a big one. There was one, it escapes me at the moment, there were 3,500 submissions. I think it was an environmental one. The current trade negotiations would have thousands of submissions. So a very visually impactful piece of work. Anyway, hopefully this makes it easier. My idea is you click on a button, you can just kind of reach in, grab the text, and then see what you've got, if you're interested. Another one, we'll see, I'll just do this afterwards. Just, again, visually, which countries are most active in terms of policy making. You could guess, it'll be America, it'll be some of the European nations. I'm pretty sure there wasn't one submission from Africa. I bet there might have been 2 from South America. So you could guess. But guessing and knowing for sure are 2 different things. Anyway, that's just a core or pleth map for anyone who's interested. Okay, so a lot of that's been done. The next bit hasn't been approached yet at all. But so, okay, so you have all your pictures, you have all your maps. You've started to, I suppose, characterize who joined this process. The next bit is then really to get involved and to analyze the text within these documents and find out the relationship, who said what, and so on and so forth. I'm not sure yet whether I use Python or to do this. It could be both. It'd probably be both for a test anyway. But we'll see how that goes. And hopefully, because of the preparation that's been done so far, I can take those 650 main text bits and just wham them through one of these libraries. We'll see. I'm optimistic in that regard. So that would be a quantitative text analysis. It's relatively frequent. It's increasingly frequently used in political science and in analysing actor statements and actor positions. So again, I'm trying to get the computational side of things to do the heavy lifting. The final step, which I'm not sure if it's final, but the next step, per se, would be some sort of a thematic network analysis. So then you can start to cluster and group actors who said the same thing. So I suspect there'll be no surprises here. All the eBays, all the Googles, all the private corporations will probably all say stuff like, oh, we absolutely respect privacy and civil liberties, but we actually just want all your data for free and you can't say anything. I suspect there'll be things like that. There'll be a few civil libertarians, there'll be a few academics who will then be on the opposite side of things, but as I say, guessing and knowing are 2 very different things. So there's been some work from the University of Constance on this. Philip Liefeld has created Discourse Network Analyzer, which might help, and will, again, do some of the heavy lifting in this regard. So these are quite small, I know you can't see them very well in the back, but we're still dealing with our converted text and documents. So that would lead me very much to my end game to know what's in these documents and who said what, and infer a relationship between. I can't prove causality because you'll never know. If they will never tell you if they met over a wine or a coffee or in an underground car park. You will never find out, I suspect, if corporations have acted in concert with one another. So maybe I'll find out, maybe I won't. But inference is probably where I'm going for on this one. And that would be the end of my methodologic. So just to recap, this European Data Protection Policy proposal, my goal to reveal the content while also hopefully bringing people in, people who are interested. Theory, SCS, science, technology, and sociology, very interesting field, probably quite relevant at the moment. And then my methodology and my results, collect the documents, parse them, filter them, slice them and dice them, text analysis, and finally some thematic network analysis. So like I said, a very kind of a methodological approach using computational methods, all off-the-shelf stuff that a normal-ish person can handle to try and make sense and to gain knowledge from this lump of material. So that's it. And if anyone wants any data visualization help ever, like I can actually help with that.
I'm totally ignorant of this field, but it's fascinating. I think that I've learned a lot. And so, well, I do have a few questions to ask you. First, what do you mean by nesting?
Nesting is this one. It's when you, nesting is a term. So you'd have all the American companies within this group here, and they're nested within each other. So when you look at the script, it spits out a JSON format, and they will be then nested, all the UK firms, all the German firms, all the French firms, and then you can start to divide them.
So do you have a sort of hierarchical structure in terms of the nesting? That do you start always a country or so forth, or in fact you can flip them around?
You can definitely flip them. So what you do is there is a script that interrogates this database.
Right.
A PHP script would interrogate this database and say, give me these fields in this order.
Right.
And then the data visualization script would pass that along and will then take those results and produce a picture of it.
Right.
It is crazy stuff.
Okay.
And I didn't write it. This is all off-the-shelf stuff.
Okay. Two other questions about the... can you add data to the actors? That is rather than the ones that you explore or flesh them out in the text or so forth. But you could actually add some interesting data about the actors. Because, so I was thinking, my knowledge of this is what the EU is doing with Google.
Right.
So why they pick Google? So when in fact your modeling here would help us understand why Google is picked, rather than, I'm sure there are millions of possible Googles and that they could pick, but why did they pick Google? Because one obvious answer is that most Europeans use Google for search, but so there's some other sort of characteristics of the actors that in fact you could. Of course, that creates a problem for you. But So that was the second one. The last question I have is the last model.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, this discourse network thing, yes.
This one. I just wonder whether, in fact, in between, rather than the actors linking to concepts again, so you sort of identify clusters of resources or things that are in common among the actors as intermediate steps. So that I suspect the actors are going to have, what, 651?
Yeah.
That's too much. I mean, so whether in fact you create groupings, try out the shared characteristics, or what I call resources, and that may then be linked to concepts. But it's just a suggestion.
That's exactly, and that's why this step here is a pre-step that you would then find common features in this thing. So all the companies that say innovation, which is basically a euphemism for dinero.
Right.
So all of the companies, or all of the organizations who say oppose, you can pick out a word and you can key on certain words, and then you can slice and dice this any way you want. So you can say, who says the word oppose? Oh, nobody, or so on and so forth. So then, yes, you could come along here and you would aggregate that word, and you'd find out all the people who said the same thing, the idea, the concept.
Well, I think this great work is not only well, it sort of map the decision-making process. And so I hope that we'll be able to generalize to other issues and decisions and policies. So you have a career built.
Excellent, you heard it here, Professor Neil.
Can I just follow up on the addition of new variables? Presumably you are referring there to things like organizational variables.
Yeah.
So the size of the organization.
There are all kinds of, I mean, I have no idea, depending on, I guess, the policy itself, because the policy makers, of course, would like to make a splash,
right,
in a sense. Then they say, okay, these are the major things to see, we get them here. And so that's why they focus on Google rather than something else. So there are certain characteristics they pick that deal with organizations. So what's about Google? In this case, of course, is 96% of Europeans use Google.
Sure.
And so it's all picked on it.
Yep.
So there are these characteristics, and you group them. So then you can identify different types of actors, and then link them to.
Yep.
And it would allow you to link to sort of social science theory about what helps people to group together around policy debates and how they build coalitions and so forth. So
Yeah.
you could add to your web form.
Yeah, that's exactly where we go.
It wouldn't mean you doing the input
Bunch of legwork.
as opposed to automating it.
Yeah.
But it probably would be relatively, you could probably do that quite an efficient way.
Yeah.
It would really help you to visualize in lots of ways that are also interesting analytically as well.
Yeah, excellent.
This is very analytical, but in sort of link you to the mainstream sort of policy network approaches.
Yeah. Well,
Random looks and all of that kind of thing, which would be very nice.
yeah. A real quick thing on this form was of the 30 documents that I said, what are the main, but you can put in, say, market share, or employee headcount, or where's their office located, and so on and so forth, and you could start to get really into it. But for this one, it was purely what came out of those results. Did I see something?
Spread the questions around as well. Anybody else?
All good?
Yeah, sure. My questions were on the data analysis itself.
Right.
So you mentioned you're doing text analysis, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. I guess, for example, would you be using code word analysis? Is it single word analysis? Is it data mining? Or are you coming up with a list of words that you're going to input to find in the system? And I guess the other thing is you mentioned that you're stripping away the text into raw text files, I guess, and through that you're reducing the formatting. So I guess in the formatting with headers and things, they might have more weight in terms of the heading on the title for a piece of the document, so that the weighting of the document often in the format allows for importance in the document. So something in the heading might be more relevant to you to find out a theme that
Sure.
maybe as opposed to the full text of a section.
Sure. Yeah.
So I was just wondering if you could talk about the text analysis.
I could talk about it a little bit because I haven't got that far along. There's a concept known as bag of words, which you may or may not have heard of, and the concept of it is it makes no difference. You could take Romeo and Juliet and you could take the Irish Times, it doesn't matter, you strip away everything, shove them both in, and statistically you will get an accurate result of what the contents of that document are. And so all the formatting, all the pagination, all these things statistically make no difference. So I am going to probably approach it with a bag of words. It's not any particularly easier. It's just according to political science who've done this kind of work, it tends to be.
But even for interpretation, because people who assign headings to things, it's the quality of interpretation of that section of text that gives it the heading. So that's why the heading, in terms of how people gather this to be important. But I guess if it comes out through the data anyway, then fair enough.
Allegedly it does. And the other problem, the other concern or thing I'm trying to stay away from is too much of my subjectivity. Because I might read a thing and go, I love that word. That's an absolutely brilliant use of that term. And I go, he's way up the rankings. And then someone else might have hacked together, English mightn't be their first language or whatever, and awful stuff, awful. So what I wanted to do was just be dispassionate and just let the algorithm hit it. But you're not wrong. And in fact, there's probably half a dozen ways to do this.
And like in terms of then, you mentioned, not necessarily discourse analysis, but you're looking for discourse, but it's in single words again. It's not a whole sentence.
I probably won't take I have to see. I'm going to have to go through them manually a bit.
Yeah.
Take a kind of a test
There
selection.
might be some software out there that might assist in some way to do something larger than maybe single word or code.
Yeah, there are dictionaries and libraries, and you can set them. But that's my next task. Yeah, Wordfish is a relatively powerful one in this regard.
Very interesting.
I've broken my word. I didn't get you to coffee at 11 o'clock. Sorry about that.
One more question.
Yeah. This policy making is like a longitudinal process. You can distinguish your text into different time periods and realize them clearly.
Totally. So what happened here was everyone was all happy and friendly. Oh yeah, we'll give you some ideas. And then the EU Commission went from a directive, which is non-binding. It's whatever you have in yourself, more or less, as long as you stay within. And they went, boom, you're having a regulation. That is a European law. There is no derogation. You have to implement it word for word. Can't wait to see what the tone of these next set of submissions were. So there was 168 here when everybody was friendly, and there were 288 here when people freaked out. A large amount of corporations were, and still are, up in arms about this regulation. So you're absolutely correct. And it'd be very interesting to see the word usage in those two time periods. And I suspect that these are much more assertive and stronger, and possibly even opposing the whole thing. But yes, absolutely.
Are you referring, because it's the e-privacy directive, but you're referring to I think it was last May or something, at EU Commission, something was ratified, but it was coming to another stage that was expected to be
Right.
fully ratified by this year. Is that, I can't remember the title of that was the complete overhaul.
Yeah, so without going too in detail on this, there's a multi-stage process. I'm only looking at the agenda setting phase. It then goes on to the European Parliament, they amend, and then it's sent to the European Council, and that's where the governments actually make the final call.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, what happened between the Commission stage, the agenda setting phase, and the European Parliament was about the same, because right in the middle of it, Edward Snowden appeared on our radars. And this was getting watered down and waning and waning. Edward Snowden appeared, and it was back up full throttle. It was like high privacy, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So luckily for me, the Commission and the European Parliament are pretty much identical. Whether or not the heads of government water it down further, it's out of my, funding time period.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
There's always interesting things to do, like even in terms of citizen submissions or participative democracy, like the bottom up. Just in terms of big news stories, like the Google Right to Be Forgotten really last year, and the cyber war attack, and
Mm-hmm.
the big news stories around the time of those submissions, whether that impacted, whether news impacted on
Yeah.
the character of or the concerns in those. Yeah.
Definitely, there's no end of it.
End to
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah. There you go. I'll pass it off to you when I'm finished.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks for all those questions. Appreciate that. Thank you.